In my last video, I was talking about how anxiety is the elephant in the room when it comes to couples and communication. You can have great tools I push on these videos, listening skills, conflict management skills, negotiating skills. But for many, many people, many couples, the invisible guest to conflict is simple fear, simple anxiety. Let's not confuse simple and easy. Fear is usually simple. Dealing with it, at least initially, can be very difficult, especially if we have a significant fear of damaging or losing the relationship somehow. So I also talked in that video about how anger is really trapped anxiety. Anxiety says run, and if we can, we do. If we can avoid, we avoid. If we can shut down, we shut down, etc. But anger, fighting, is linked to feeling trapped. How do we not feel trapped? How do we deal with the scary topic, the scary issue, the scary fear, and not either shut down or leave, flight, anxiety, run, or explosion, anger, rage, shouting, broken windows, etc.? The answer is we have to address our fear. We've got to talk about fears, our worries, our concerns, and have a sense that we can do that safely. Well, again, simple, not necessarily easy. A lot of things can get in the way of that. I always think in these conversations about the what if questions we're asking ourselves, and not necessarily, in fact, likely not consciously. What if I say this and he or she thinks less of me? What if I tell this fear and they think, holy crap, this person's damaged, or I could never make this work with them? What if I express my fear, tell them what I'm anxious about, he or she, and they begin to get anxious and they don't want to talk to me? What if I hurt their feelings? What if I say the wrong thing and they think I hate their mother? I mean, the list just goes on and on and on. But I'm going to make this the central theme of this video. Being able to talk about our fears, we are more than halfway to being able to do something about them. The longer they stay in the shadows, the longer they attend the relationship but don't get talked about, the tendency is the more they corrode, damage, injure, bring down that relationship. Some wise person at some point said, fears in the dark fester and grow. Yeah, it's a true statement. Fears that get exposed to daylight, that get exposed to the relationship and get talked about, by definition, they have the potential to diminish, shrink, be manageable. There's another famous quote, fear is false expectations appearing real. They're not always false. Sometimes our fears have some basis in justification. That still doesn't mean that we shouldn't talk about them. At the end of the day, you might have a bad reaction, but then let's talk that through. Let's figure out what we're both of us are getting provoked by in our fear. So at some point, you have to take the courageous step and talk about your fear. This is what I'm afraid of. This is what I'm anxious about. There are other discussions I'm having and will have here about how to identify what you're afraid of. We're not always clear what we're afraid of right away. But a lot of the time, we do know what we're afraid of. We have at least some idea. And so one of the things to do, the starting point, is to say, listen, I need to talk about this thing. I want to have a conversation. It scares me to death or frightens me a lot. I just want you to listen. And now we're back to my old saw, reflective listening. The other person's only mission is to summarize back what they've heard. Does that mean that they won't have reactions? Probably not. Although they might not. Wouldn't that be a nice surprise? That happens a lot too. But the mission is to get heard first, and get heard until you really feel like you're listened to. And then you return the favor. Again, in almost every video I create here, I talk about some application of reflective listening. That's one great, perhaps one of the most important tools we can bring to a discussion about our fears. Here's a second one. Don't try to address it all in a single crazy burst. One of the things people don't talk about with anxiety is the minute we give voice to it, the minute we start talking about it, the tendency is we want to talk about all our fears right now. And here they come, baby, pouring out of us. But that's not necessarily useful either. Better to take it in small bites. Take your biggest fear first. Maybe tackle two fears, and then take a break. I call those timeouts, and timeouts have various uses. One of them is to not try to get through all your fear discussions at one time. Probably you have more than one fear. Your partner might have reactions. This is going to take time, and you want to see this as a process over time. So timeouts are fair. Nobody plays a football game in one quarter. Nobody builds a house in an afternoon unless you're Amish, and then it's usually a barn. That's pretty cool. But for most things, processes take time. Let them have time. Timeouts, let conversations, difficult conversations have time. And constrain the amount of things you're going to talk about in a single discussion about fear. Just those two things are going to significantly help the process of being in the room long enough to have a useful conversation or 10 about your fears. Because there's something else in here. As you talk about them, they begin to morph. You begin to see them differently. Your partner can begin to see them differently. Some of the anxiety and fear will leach out of the room, especially as you get listened to. That feeds back on itself. I'm not saying there won't be bumps, back steps, misunderstanding, but again, reflecting, taking time, limiting the conversation in time, all helpful in dealing with these risky, scary things. And what that leads to is my next recommendation, which is just practicing having difficult conversations. A lot of what I do with my clients is I just make it possible for them to practice again and again and again, having a difficult conversation. So you get some skill at listening. So you get some skill at stepping away. So you get some skill at practicing only talking about one or two things at a time. Heck, you just get some skill listening to someone else's fears and not having immediately your own reactions overwhelm the conversation, which is a big part of why people don't fight. The fights get away from them. Which leads to my next recommendation. Expect this process to have mistakes, bumps in the road. Expect it to not go perfectly. Nobody learns something the first time they do it, whatever movies or TV teach us. This is a skill set. It's going to take time. You might get through 2 or 3 difficult conversations and you're amazed how well they go. And on number 4, your partner just loses their crap, just gets really defensive and hurt. Or you suddenly, all your fear comes up and grabs you by the throat, and now you can't think, you can't talk, you're in tears, or you're enraged, or you're stomping around. Please don't kick the dog. That's going to happen. You're going to have, again, as you practice, better and worse days, better and worse moments. And that's my next recommendation. Granting each other grace, room to make mistakes, room to not get it right, room to have reactions, which is hard because a lot of us have a history of saying something and our partner's dumping on us or running away. We feel like we've given them grace. We've given them a chance. Well, you have to restart that process as you begin to deliberately practice having conversation about fear, about anxiety, because nothing's going to be more likely to provoke a reaction than wading into the deep end about what it is we're afraid of, what it is we want to deal with. And there are big topics: money, sex, children, in-laws, jobs, geography. There are medium-sized topics. How do we spend the summer? Where do we go on vacation? Do we have enough money in the 401k? What are we going to do? Christmas travel. Should we move to a new house? There are small topics. Why don't we ever get that chance to fool around after work? Why are we always racing the kids to soccer practice? The possibilities are infinite, and any of them can provoke or bang into our fear. We have to be able to talk about it. And the more we talk about it, the more we're able to deal with it, and the less it frightens us over time. And there's the golden apple we're chasing, is to talk about fears until those fears don't scare us the same way. One of my mentors very early in this work said, we fight about the things we can't comfortably talk about. In other words, we fight about our fear. We fight about our anxiety. So let's get good at it. Let's make it so we can do it effectively. It's going to make the relationship so much stronger, so much more agile, so much less fragile. All right, more about communication to couples next time. Thanks.